Hey, it's Nick Fundytus here, and this is Nick Answers Reddit for March 8th, 2024. So today's question is a really common one, and I wanted to expand on it just because we see it come up a lot. And user Buckwild Billy has a question about an agent representing seller and buyer. So his question is, do I stand a better chance at winning a house purchase if I go in requesting I use the seller's agent as my buyer's agent? Really common question. To me, it seems more attractive that an agent representing a seller would want to lean towards my offer and making it seem better if it's close to another person's offer on the house. I know this is a conflict of interest, but how do you prove it? I'm going to come back to that statement. At the end of the day, the agent won't have to split the commission if he goes with me versus another buyer being represented. So the only issue I have with that question is the part about, I know it's a conflict of interest, but how do you prove it? I very much believe that we should not, just as people in general, we should not be trying to take advantage of other people, and we should be acting in a way that we would want to be treated. So, purposely having a conflict of interest to get an advantage over somebody else, I'm not for it. So I think if this person was my client, I probably wouldn't represent them if they wanted to do that, but I do have an answer to clear up their questions. So Buckwild Billy, that is a good question and one that comes up a lot, and it's worth clearing this up as it's not everything that has been commented in this thread has been correct so far. So in short, it's going to depend upon what province you are in as to whether a listing realtor can represent you as a buyer client or not. It is allowed for certain in Ontario, which is where I work and which is where the Redditor here is located, as long as buyer and seller can agree to it in writing. It is my understanding that it's not allowed in BC, but it is allowed in most, or if not all, of the other provinces and territories. Maybe a realtor from other places can chime in to say for sure. As to whether it's worthwhile, which is the second part of the question, for you as a buyer to have the listing realtor represent you, that's going to depend on a number of factors. So many people are going to do what I call stepping over a dollar to get to a dime. Believing that they're getting a good deal when maybe they're really not. They're using the commission as kind of the only leverage on their price, when possibly they could have negotiated more if they would have known the true value of the home. So make sure if you go this route, and it's certainly a possible route to take, make sure you really know the values of the home. So here's the expanded explanation of why those answers are the way they are. So first of all, in Ontario, you can be represented as a buyer or a seller, or as a client or as an unrepresented party. These are newly clarified designations that came in with TRESA, which is the Trust and Real Estate Services Act, in December 2023. Further to that, if you're a client and your agent owes you fiduciary duty, you can be either represented by the whole brokerage, this is called brokerage level representation, or by one or more realtors on a brokerage or team, called designated representation. So this would be where, if you worked with me, for example, we would sign that I'm your designated representative. We might also add Kareem for my team on there, so that way if I have a day off, Kareem can legally cover you. When you work with a realtor, so under this act, I've found that it's, for the majority of our clients at least, it makes sense to choose designated representation because it's more specific and it avoids the potential conflicts that come with multiple representation. Speaking of which, multiple representation, also called double ending, occurs when the same party, such as one realtor acting under designated representation or one brokerage in brokerage representation, represents both the buyer and the seller in the transaction. Total commission, and here's how commission works on a listing. Total commission offered by a seller to their listing brokerage is set out in the listing agreement. Now, there's often a provision for part of that commission to be given to the broker's realtor or the broker's realtor's brokerage, where it gets further split up. If there's no buyer realtor involved in the purchase, a number of things can happen. There's no set way this happens. And you don't actually, in a listing agreement, you don't have to set out commission for the buyer's realtor. So the listing realtor, they might get the total commission. That happens a lot. They might have a provision for discount. For example, that's what we do. We list our home, when we list a home, we do it at 5% total. We offer 2.5% to the buyer's agent. But if it's our team that double ends and the seller is cool with that and the buyer is cool with that, the total commission goes down to 3.5. So, the 1% and a bit goes to, my buyer realtor on my team, and the rest stays with me and gets split up with the brokerage for different costs and whatnot. I'm losing my place here. So what is important to know is that there's no set type of commission or way it works, and the only parties to the listing agreement are the seller and their realtor. So a buyer and their agent are not parties to this. So the commission can only be changed if the seller and their agent both agree in writing. So there's some people that will say, "Well, go in and demand you get the buyer's commission." No, that's not how it works. You're not a party to that listing agreement, so you don't get to go and demand. You can certainly ask, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just know what the difference is. Now, many buyers believe that they will get that buyer's realtor's portion of the total commission paid by the seller if they work with the listing realtor directly. Now, in Ontario, at least, and I suspect it's probably the same in most, if not all the other provinces, it is not permitted to pay a non-realtor commission from the sale of a listed home. Though there are some brokerage that have structured things so that on closing, they can legally give a rebate to their buyer. So when you see something like a cash back broker, it's structured as a rebate that happens on closing, and there's a way that they do it that's all legal. It is not further on legality. It's not illegal to ask a listing realtor to reduce their commission if they double end a sale with you, although they're not under any obligation to do so if it's already written in their listing agreement. Now, some realtors, they refuse to double end deals, and I would agree in most circumstances that it's very difficult to fairly and impartially represent both parties, especially your seller who who met you first, represent them both fairly to a sale while trying to give fiduciary duty to both. Realtors are well within their rights to refuse to work with a buyer if they feel it prohibits them from properly representing their seller client. In fact, we can, if there are reasonable grounds, we can choose to not work with anybody. We choose not to work with people all the time. So we want to make sure that these are people that are serious buyers, and they honestly want to buy a house, and they can afford to buy what they're hoping to buy. Now, supposing that a listing realtor does agree to reduce their commission to double end a sale, for the buyer, this might represent a commission discount of about 0 to 2.5% in most markets, from what I've heard. As a buyer, you're going to need to make sure that you're getting enough of a deal before the commission, question even comes into place, that you're actually getting a good overall price of the home when it's all done and when it's all paid for at the end. This requires a very, very clear idea of what home values are in the market. And if you don't have a good grasp of home values, consider where you can find that information. That may involve something like House Sigma and doing a lot of research. It may involve, getting a realtor. It may involve, just make sure you're getting the information that you need out there, and don't just say, okay, I'm getting a good deal because I'm getting a reduction on commission. No, that listing realtor and especially the seller could be screwing you. So make sure that knowledge is your friend, and knowledge and understanding of the situation. Now, in Ontario, if there are multiple offers on a property, there's not multiple representation, but multiple offers, and one buyer's realtor is accepting a discounted commission. So either maybe it's you because you're working directly with the listing realtor, or maybe it's just another realtor whose realtor is discounting the commission that they're receiving, not rebating to you, but discounting it. All other parties offering on the property are informed of that, and they all have a chance to make adjustments if they want. So, sometimes all you're doing is starting an arms race to where nobody really wins or doesn't win. Because in the end, it's just the seller who's going to get the best price on the property. So, make sure you've got good information and good representation if you've decided to have representation. Almost done here. In Ontario, a listing realtor has to represent their seller client first and foremost, fiduciary duty, until the moment that you also become a client of theirs. And then it becomes multiple representation. In fact, they are very, very limited under TRESA what they can and will do for you until then. If you have run into a realtor since December last year who said, I can't give you this information, I can't give you this service, I can't show you the home unless we're working together, they're not lying. That's new representation. They do have to explain how this all works under TRESA. A very good resource for you here would be to go to the RICO information guide, which I've linked in the answer. Shows that buyers and sellers, what you need to do when you're going to work together to buy a home. Now, I'll wrap this up by a few false statements that often show up in these. And in fact, 2 out of these 3 did show up here. So number 1, it's illegal for a realtor to double end a sale. In most provinces, it's not. It's certainly not in Ontario. Might be, I don't know if it's illegal or just not permitted in BC, but it depends on the province because real estate is provincially administered. Now, it's free to work with a buyer's realtor. So sometimes you get buyer's realtor who say, well, it's free to work with me anyways. And that's an old perception that's out there too, that lots of homeowners and home buyers will say that too. That's not exactly true either. So since the buyer is paying for the home, since you as a buyer are paying for the home, and the commission forms part of what's paid for the home, really you are paying the commission for the home. You just don't have control necessarily of how much commission that is. You could also argue that the seller is the one paying the listing brokerage out of the proceeds of the sale of the home. So you could say that the seller is paying the commission. Anyways, all it means is that somebody is paying commission. There's no such thing as free commission. So therefore, there's no such thing as being represented for free. What's probably more accurate in this scenario, and more accurate to say, is just to say that if commission is provided to the buyer's realtor by the seller in the listing agreement, there's no additional cost to the buyer to have their own realtor representative. So if that makes more sense, that's much more accurate there. Now, the final statement is, listing realtors will get my offer accepted because they get more commission. Well, a shady one's going to, sure. Do you want to work with a shady realtor? Do you think you're going to get a good deal on the house? If you work with a shady realtor, I don't know. But some will. But all realtors are required to present any legal offers, verbal offer doesn't count here, to the seller. It is the seller who decides whether to accept the offer or not. And the listing realtor can't just decide not to present an offer or slow walk your offer, so that they can get their own offer accepted. There are serious consequences to this in Ontario and probably through the rest of the country as well. And if you know or even suspect that a realtor has done this, this is a highly, anti-consumer practice. It's really greasy. Call them out on it. So go talk to their licensing, their governing body. So that would be RICO here in Ontario, and call it out in their online reviews. Make it public. These, those type of realtors should not exist. They give the rest of us a really bad name. And there should be no place for that behavior. So there you go. I hope that answer was helpful for you. I'm sorry to take a little dig about, the taking advantage of, what you said in your question about conflict of interest and taking advantage of that. I'm just saying, please go forward, equitable, with the spirit of to get a win-win on your deal. You're going to get an offer. You want a home. Seller wants to sell their home. Let's try not to take huge advantage of each other when we do that. So good luck, whatever route you take. And I am a realtor in Ontario. That's why I know this stuff. Check in next week. I'll have a new answer for you, or you can go back through YouTube and see if I've already answered a question that you might have. If you have a question of your own, send it in the comments, or you can reach out to me at nickfundytus.ca or any of my team's coordinates. We always love answering your questions. Bye for now.